Let me give you a few of the details of that very briefly. Strong. These ambitions are broad ambitions. But the other thing that was clear in developing those ambitions was that you had to have some way of measuring how we were going towards them. Had to have some way of really putting giving a direction to them, putting a stamp on them as to their importance. So each of them, those broad visions, are accompanied by a couple of specific targets. So let me tell you what they are. So strong refers to making Queensland's economy strong, future-proofing in the words of my communication person. So that means no longer being driven by an economy that's susceptible purely to or built purely on commodities, but one that is built on knowledge. It means no longer having an economy that is based on natural resources, but one that's based on intellectual resources. And the particular target that's sitting there, the key target that's important to us as scientists in there, is that we will increase by 50% over this next 10 years the number of Queensland firms that are innovating. At the moment, Queensland has more firms innovating as a proportion of the total than anywhere else in the country as it happens. It's a fairly flaky statistic, but it is a fact that it's about 48% of our firms are innovating, so our target then is 72% by 2020. Clearly, that innovation is going to be driven by scientists, engineers, technologists and mathematicians, amongst others, but primarily it's going to be driven by the knowledge that's generated by those people. The second one, these are in no particular order, just as I try and remember them. The second one, healthy, is to make Queenslanders, from arguably the least healthy people in Australia, other than those of the Northern Territory, into the most healthy people in Australia. The reason the Northern Territory is less healthy than us is the reason that we're the second. It's basically the size of a very underprivileged Indigenous population. And that in turn driven not just by the Indigenous population, but broadly speaking by the fact that we in Queensland, 60% of males are overweight or obese, hardly any of you here, and 40% of females. And the other risk factors are almost as bad. Queenslanders, by and large, smoke more. We drink to excess more. No one of these are we necessarily the worst, but we're up there amongst the worst in each case. So the target there is to reduce those underlying risk factors for chronic disease by 50% by 2020. Sorry, by a third by 2020. So instead of having 62% of male Queenslanders overweight, we'll have 41%, etc. Again, science is going to have to play a significant role in that. And when I said before, I was picking up on the point about ANZAAS bringing together different disciplines, it will have to bring together different disciplines. Because it's not just going to be the scientist that discovers a better way to find an early marker for this sort of cancer or that sort of cancer that's going to help us to address those early stages of chronic disease. It's going to be a combination of that sort of science. It's going to be a combination of the social science and the education that gets into our schools that trains kids from a very early age, or at least gives kids an appreciation from a very early age of what the relevance of what risk factors are. And those children in turn translating that evidence onto their parents. It's going to be people like you, Peter, working out better ways to set up communities in this state that provide for people to get to provide a level of exercise, for example, in the community. All those transport systems, all those things have to work together. So it's very broad science. It's going to be required to be integrated for that. Just while I'm thinking about it, in each of these, just to give you an impression of why I say that our Premier intends to achieve these goals. Those of you that read the political press would have noticed, how long ago was it? 2 months ago, a complete reorganisation of the machinery of government in this state, so that There were previously 30-something different departments. There are now 20-something different departments. The numbers of directors general of those departments have all been reduced. The departments have been consolidated into 5 broad areas around those themes that I've just been describing. And the CEOs of those departments, their job descriptions are now being written to include the performance indicators around these targets that I'm talking about that they have to achieve as part of their whatever they do, how they get paid and stuff like that. So there's quite a significant backing for this whole thing, this whole range of targets around the way in which government's organised. So that was healthy. Green is obviously to pass on to your children and your grandchildren a state that's as habitable as the one that we inherited, and obviously requires a whole raft of different things. There are 2 specific targets in there. One's to increase the amount of parkland in Queensland, I think it's by 50%. And the other one is to reduce the individual amount of greenhouse gas we produce per person in the state. Very much, the other thing about each of these that I'm mentioning is, as well as being interdisciplinary, and as well as being absolutely fundamentally grounded in science, they also require the clear involvement of the community, one of the other aspects of your goals for ANZAAS. So these are particularly that reduce your greenhouse gas emissions by 50%, 30%, a third. I'll get to it eventually. We currently produce in Queensland about 46 tonnes of greenhouse gas per person per annum. The Australian figure is 26, the Chinese figure is 3. We've got a little way to come down. The US figure is 26 or 28. Yeah. So we produce a lot. A relatively small part of that is your household greenhouse gas emissions, but nevertheless it's pretty significant. So that's target number 3, to get that down. What do we as scientists have to do with it? We have a huge amount to do with it in terms of developing more efficient buildings, of developing alternative energy sources, developing better both renewable and cleaner energy sources, etc., etc.